Discover the incredible transformation, the one secretary who inspired a wheelchair-bound billionaire. Margaret sat at her desk, a modest partition separating her from a cacophony of voices she had learned to tune out. In a law firm where authority was woven into every fabric of culture, her role felt like a whisper buried beneath a landslide of male bravado. As she organized files and supported the towering egos around her, a storm brewed deep within. The ambition to rise, to be more, pulsed like a distant drum. How long could she remain just a scriber, invisibly serving those who overlooked her potential? Then everything changed. The news of Jonathan's accident shook her world. She had always regarded him as the firm's rising star, brilliant and charismatic, his cases celebrated, his ability to command a room undeniable. Now his laughter was replaced by a sharp silence, his mobility erased, and vivid flashes of his once assured presence left her raw. Her heart twisted with the disquieting thought that his promising future mirrored her own stalled aspirations. If only he could bounce back, would the same grace be granted to her? In the days that followed, Margaret found herself gravitating toward Jonathan's office, navigating the delicate waters of professionalism intertwined with empathy. Their partnership on the high-profile case felt pivotal, but dread settled like a heavy fog. His need for support highlighted her role as mere aid versus a competent equal. What if I stumble? The thought clawed at her insides. Doubt mingled with determination as she pored over documents, desperate to prove herself not just to him, but to everyone who had dismissed her talents. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As they delved deeper into the case, Margaret sensed an electrifying shift. With every briefing shared, a new confidence ignited within her. Yet, along with it, came the fear of what she might uncover in her grandfather's past, tangled ties to Jonathan's family that flickered ominously in her mind. The whispers of old scandals, the family legacy hanging precariously over her and Jonathan like a dark cloud. What if my potential led to unearthing something that pulled us both under? A dizzying cycle of hope and panic churned in her gut. Margaret could feel the intensity build. Their friendship deepened as they spent hours together, both finding solace in mutual support. Yet with each shared laugh, doubt dug deeper. Her male colleague's sneers looped back in her mind like a tape stuck on. Was she truly equipped for this? The anxiety threatened to paralyze her just as Jonathan had been immobilized by his accident. As shadows of judgment loomed, she wrestled with a haunting question. Could a secretary ever rise to stand alongside a respected lawyer? With the hour of reckoning nearing, Margaret stood on the brink of transformation. Every heartbeat pulsed with urgency as she gripped the folder tight, its contents promising to unveil the truth of their intertwined fates. The clock ticked, tension electrifying the very air around her. Would she cross the divide and confront not just the firm, but every misconception linked to her identity? As they prepared for the meeting that loomed large, Margaret's heart drummed a frantic rhythm. Time was slipping away. Would she unleash the courage to claim her voice, or let fear swallow her whole? Margaret's palms were slick with sweat as she looked at the clock, a striking reminder that time was no longer her ally. The folder lay like a weight in her hands, the papers crammed with details begging for attention, promising revelations that could either elevate her or expose her insecurities. Steeling herself, she took a deep breath, attempting to summon the confidence that had flickered into existence alongside her burgeoning partnership with Jonathan. The meeting was barely an hour away, and the conference room buzzed with the usual air of expectation. punctuated by her colleagues' laughter that felt charged with an undercurrent of judgment. They held the power to dismiss her contributions, to solidify her title as merely a secretary, none of them aware of the judicious insights she had been honing. Yet here she was, seconds away from being cast into this arena, her every word and decision scrutinized as if she were glass. "Margaret!" Jonathan's voice pulled her from her reverie. His wheelchair navigated seamlessly through the sea of paper and opinion that surrounded them. His gaze met hers, a blend of gratitude and expectation that intensified her resolve. "You've done an incredible job. It's time we show them what we've accomplished." The stakes had risen with his encouragement. He needed her as much as she needed him. They were no longer two people tethered by circumstance, but partners in a challenge that could redefine their futures. The idea that only days earlier terrified her now flickered like a beacon. Susan from accounting would not stand in the way of her abilities and insights. "All right, let's do this," she whispered under her breath, hoping the quiet affirmation would settle her nerves. Once inside the conference room, the atmosphere shifted. First came the sound of chairs scraping against the hardwood floor, followed by the clipped voices of senior partners discussing figures and strategies. Their familiar faces, stoic and rooted in tradition, turned to her as if registering her presence for perhaps the first time. Taking a deep breath, Margaret stood beside Jonathan, who nodded subtly, encouraging her to take the lead. "Thank you all for gathering today. I'm excited to present our findings." Her voice almost quivered. She clenched her fists and glanced at Jonathan, who smiled encouragingly. What started as a straightforward presentation cranked up the stakes when she addressed the intricate details connecting the case to her grandfather's past. Each word fueled the ripples of uncertainty among the partners, manifesting in widened eyes and exchanged glances. With a blend of knowledge accumulated from late-night research and Jonathan's insights, she laid the foundation of their argument, methodically dismantling misconceptions in front of their audience. As they tackled each counter-argument, Margaret felt the confidence from moments ago returning with resounding force. Confronting their skepticism head-on felt liberating. Yet in the back of her mind, the specter of her family's hidden past lingered, waiting for the perfect moment to strike a shadow over her triumph. When the meeting concluded, applause erupted from some corners of the room. Whispers of approval threaded their way through the air. Margaret felt light, as though she could float above the table, connected to all who had doubted her. But the weight of those unknowns still clung to her heart like an anchor. "Now that wasn't so hard, was it?" Jonathan quipped, a teasing smile playing on his lips. Yet she could sense the underlying seriousness in his tone. "But there's more at stake now. With that revelation, we need to look deeper into your grandfather's connections." The realization struck like a lightning bolt. What they had unearthed was now the beginning of a dangerous road, one where exposure could dismantle not just her present, but also her future. Her determination clashed once more with fear, igniting the same question she had wrestled with before. Could she truly claim her voice, or would the shadows of her family's past once again hold her captive? Margaret's thoughts raced as she stared out of the conference room window. The cityscape stretched before her, a chaotic blend of ambition and aspiration that mirrored her internal struggle. With every passing second, the applause from the meeting lingered in her ears, a mix of triumph and anxiety that dented her newfound confidence. It struck her, Jonathan was right. They had opened a Pandora's box capable of reshaping not only her career, but also her relationship with her family's past. The weight of her grandfather's legacy hung over her like an impending storm. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with trepidation. There was no turning back, not now that she had tasted the thrill of proving herself. Jonathan's demeanor shifted, seriousness danced in his eyes. "We need to dig deeper into the corporations he was involved with, potential connections that could link to the case. I sensed something during your presentation, an undercurrent that suggested we might find unexpected alliances or conflicts. She nodded, absorbing his words. With her heart racing, she imagined whatever they unearthed, connections that could either bolster their case or drag them into murky depths. Each potential revelation felt like a double-edged sword, and self-doubt threatened to creep in. What if her efforts unveiled something catastrophic, something that would align their work with shadows from which she had tried to escape? Right, Margaret breathed, pushing her discomfort aside. I'll start with the previous case files he was involved in, and you can look into his network. Maybe there's something in the archives that hasn't been uncovered yet. As she turned her gaze back to Jonathan, she saw a flicker of admiration and confidence in him. It spurred her determination. She was no longer merely a secretary. She was now an investigator on a quest to reclaim her family's narrative. Returning to her desk felt surreal. The folders that once seemed to stifle her were now portals to empowerment. Each document she sifted through whispered secrets of a past she thought she had severed ties with. The names that appeared on the pages echoed in her mind, the connections lining up like a puzzle waiting to be completed. Hours slipped through her fingers as Margaret consumed every detail. With each name, each company referenced, she made mental notes. A web of relationships began to form, growing thicker and more intricate as she connected dots between the past and the present. Something about the swirling chaos felt comforting. She was processing information, asserting control, transforming confusion into clarity. But as the sun began to set, painting the office in hues of orange and deep violet, an unsettling thought gnawed at her. Would she lose more than she gained? She paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard, grappling with the decision to probe deeper into family ties she had kept buried. What if the truth was darker than she imagined, lurking just beyond her reach? Margaret pushed her chair back, breathing heavily as her internal conflict flared. She couldn't afford to flinch now. Her past had gifted her insights and drive. Now it demanded an exploration into the roots of her lineage. She was realizing, unexpectedly, that in understanding her grandfather's world, she would unveil a part of herself that had long remained dormant. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan appeared on the screen. "Let's meet up in an hour. I found something that could change everything." Her heartbeat quickened as fear tangled with anticipation. What could this new discovery be? Did it hold the potential to reinforce her newfound strength or plunge her into chaos? Only one path lay ahead. The time had come to confront the shadows of her family as they stood on the precipice of a deeper truth. With resolve tying her heart to her ambitions, Margaret prepared to delve even deeper into the legacy she shared with her family. She could no longer evade what awaited her. It was time to confront the truth head-on. Margaret arrived at the cafe, her thoughts swirling with what Jonathan might have discovered and how it could alter their course. Every step toward their booth felt heavy with expectation, a physical weight pressing against her resolve. The sun was dipping, low, casting elongated shadows, mirroring her own uncertainty. This was not just about the case anymore. It was a personal excavation, a journey into the unknown depths of her grandfather's legacy. "Thanks for meeting," she said, as she slid into the seat across from Jonathan. His expression was intense, charged with an energy that made her pulse quicken. "I think I might have found a crucial thread," Jonathan began, leaning forward slightly, a confidential spark igniting in his eyes. "Do you remember that corporation your grandfather was a legal advisor for, Global Dynamics?" Margaret felt her heart drop momentarily. "Yes, they were embroiled in numerous scandals, weren't they? What about them?" "He had a secret role, more than just advisor," Jonathan said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Records indicate he may have orchestrated negotiations that steered many high-profile deals to their advantage. Deals that don't just trace back to a few million in profit, but appear to involve some shady practices linked to environmental violations." Her breath caught, a mix of dread and intrigue flooding her mind. "Are you suggesting that my grandfather?" "Yes, he may have been at the helm of something much bigger. The legacy you are uncovering, it could be a legacy of corruption." Margaret hesitated, her own desire for validation clashing with the taint of her grandfather's actions. Seizing power, shaping narratives, the very traits she was beginning to appreciate within herself were now entwined with something sinister. Was her pursuit of truth turning her into someone she feared? The thought gnawed at her conscience, urging her to question her motives with increasing intensity. "I have to investigate this further. I need to know the complete picture," she finally said, the determination edging into her voice. There would be no turning back now. She would face whatever shadows lay ahead. Jonathan nodded, his admiration palpable. "That's the spirit. Let's gather everything we can find on him and the corporation. Emails, internal reports, anything." The evening began to unfold like a map of uncharted territory. Each document they unearthed painted new dimensions of her grandfather's life, filled with negotiations fueled by avarice and strategic alliances that threatened the environment. Each revelation was a mirror reflecting a distorted image of who she thought he was. She couldn't help but wonder if his legacy plagued her as much as gave her strength. Was she destined to repeat his mistakes? Or could the truth she unearthed transform this dark heritage into something enlightening? Every truth unearthed chipped away at her resolve, yet it also sculpted a fierce resilience within her. Late into the night, they buried themselves in research, each finding deepening the pit of her anxiety, yet igniting a fierce curiosity. She began to see herself as a multifaceted being, capable of choice, rather than a mere reflection of her grandfather's shadow. Suddenly, a noise broke her concentration, a faint notification from her phone. A message blinked at her, sending a jolt through her as she scanned the brief text. "I have information that changes everything." A chill ran down her spine as she cradled the device in her hand, fear colliding with the thrill of the unknown. What had she unleashed? What did this new information signify? The room closed in on her as her heart raced, tethering her to the mess of her past while beckoning her toward an unpredictable future. Was this the moment she had been preparing for, or did it herald a more perilous chapter? With newfound courage boiling within, Margaret knew that deeper complexities awaited her at this crossroads, where the remnants of her grandfather's life might finally converge with the truth she desperately sought. Margaret stared at her phone, the glowing screen mapping out a new route in her journey. The urgency in the message amplified the chaos in her mind. She had 10 seconds, no, 5, to decide what to do. The idea of confronting whatever truth lay beyond her current discoveries electrified her senses. Would she finally gain clarity, or merely plunge deeper into the labyrinthine legacy of her grandfather? "I need to take this," Margaret said, her voice steadier than she felt. Jonathan's brow furrowed, but he nodded, his support evident, an anchor in an increasingly stormy sea. She stepped outside the cafe, the cool air cooling her rising anxiety. Shadows danced across the pavement, reminiscent of the moral ambiguities now entwined with her very identity. Who was she willing to become in this pursuit of the truth? The specter of her grandfather loomed large, his reputation a darkened mirror reflecting a part of her she was adamant to confront. Without hesitation, she tapped on the message, her mind racing through the possible implications. "Where to meet," she typed back, cradling a fragile hope that this encounter might lead her closer to resolution. The reply was almost instantaneous, directing her to a small park a few blocks away. As she walked, each step resonated with an unfamiliar strength. She was unraveling secrets, learning to embrace her agency rather than be paralyzed by inherited fear. The notion of wielding the truth as a weapon, digging into a family legacy marked by greed, made her pulse quicken. The park was shrouded in twilight, the air dense with unspoken truths. Margaret spotted a figure seated on a bench, fingers drumming nervously against his knee. He looked up as she approached, his face a canvas of apprehension. "Margaret, I'm Adrian," he said softly, extending a hand, clearly anxious about the unfolding conversation. As she shook his hand, Margaret felt a determined resolve solidifying within. His nervous energy mirrored her own lingering fears, but for the first time she recognized it as an invitation to embark on a mutual journey. "I have information that changes everything about your grandfather and global dynamics," Adrian continued, worry etched into his features. "Then let's get to it," she replied, urging him to dive in. The urgency of their meeting was more than just revealing hidden truths. It was about redefining who she was shaped to be. He shifted closer, his voice lowered. "Your grandfather had insiders across multiple regulatory agencies. They mitigated potential investigations, erased evidence, aligned with corporate interests, effectively covering their tracks from public scrutiny." Each word he uttered sank heavy into her chest. This wasn't merely betrayal, it was a calculated, relentless pursuit of power at the expense of people and ecosystems. The realization intensifying, Margaret could feel her sense of self-imposed morality stretching thin. How could she continue in the face of such corruption? Would exposing this legacy lead to personal elevation or descent into chaos? As Adrian laid out facts intertwined with fearful anecdotes, she found her thoughts racing and expanding. Information was sparking a new light in her perception, fragments gathering together, insubstantial concepts hardening into a critical understanding of complexity. "Why are you telling me this?" she pressed, her intensity sharpened by the need to comprehend both his motives and the weight of the truth. "I believe in accountability, and you have the media platform to expose what he did, to redefine this narrative," Adrian replied, eyes gleaming with a mix of admiration and admiration. The weight of his statement lingered in the air, draping over her like a cloak. Could accountability be the driving force behind her choice to reveal her grandfather's past? Or would it mimic the very traits she was starting to embrace in her professional climb: manipulation, cunning, ambition? Margaret stood at the precipice, the decision before her like a towering cliff. She could wield her newfound strength and risk the revelations of her lineage, or retreat into the shadows of her predecessor's choices. Within her, fear intermingled with resolve, crafting a dichotomy she hadn't fully comprehended until this moment. Taking a deep breath, she felt the stirrings of clarity and determination surging through her veins. She was not merely a vessel for her grandfather's legacy. She had transcended that. "Let's bring this to light," she asserted, the heat of this new purpose igniting within her. Adrian nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting into a slight smile, though the gravity of the task ahead pressed heavily on their shoulders. The path was laid before them, lined with potential peril and the thrill of empowerment. But first they had to gather evidence, trailblazing closer to a truth that could fracture everything she had once believed about family and integrity. As they left the park, an unsettling question echoed in her mind. How far was she truly willing to go for truth? The decision crystallized within her. Exposing the truth about her grandfather couldn't simply be an act of defiance. It had to be a catalyst for her own evolution. With the crisp night air invigorating her resolve, Margaret felt the weight of her choice settle into her bones, igniting a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. "Where do we start?" she asked Adrian, as they paced briskly along the park's edge, shadows stretching and bending around them like the secrets they were about to unravel. "First, we need documentation. Anything we can find that links your grandfather to those cover-ups, internal communications, financial records, anything." "It won't be easy. The deeper we dig, the more precautions will likely be in place," Adrian responded, his brow drawing together in concentration. Margaret nodded. The gravity of their task pressed on her, but her faith in her own capabilities began to blossom. The skills she had honed over years of navigating a demanding media career could offer a tactical advantage. She was not just a participant in a family legacy, she was stepping into her own power, armed with a fierce determination to unveil the truth. "We can start by reaching out to former associates of his," Margaret suggested, recalling the contacts she made during her time as an investigative journalist. "Anyone who might be willing to spill secrets?" The mention of former associates stirred a sense of apprehension in her. What if they didn't want to talk? Or worse, what if they had been silenced? Yet this trepidation was overshadowed by a burgeoning confidence. She could channel her anxiety, not as fear to paralyze, but as fuel to propel her forward. "Do you have specific names in mind?" Adrian asked, eyeing her with a mix of enthusiasm and caution. "Yes, there's Carla. She worked in PR at Global Dynamics and left after the scandal broke a year ago. She was adamant about her ethical stance. If anyone knows something, it will be her. The question is, how do we approach her?" Margaret felt a flicker of excitement at the prospect of contacting Carla, but it was mixed with the uncertainty of what they might find. Adrian glanced around, muttering, "We should meet at a public place she's familiar with. It'll be less intimidating for her." Margaret recalled Carla's favorite cafe, far away from the corporate shadows that loomed over them now. "In that case, let's meet tomorrow afternoon. We need to be prepared with questions that not only draw her out, but also give her the sense that this is safe." The mission crystallized in her mind, yet a nagging doubt tugged at her. She had once praised her grandfather, glossed over his failings in her articles to protect their family image. Now she was moving in the opposite direction, dismantling the very pedestal she had placed him on. As they parted ways, Margaret pondered the profound shift within herself. Was she ready to confront the family that had defined her life, to peel back layers of facade? What would the backlash entail for her personally and professionally? Yet a burgeoning excitement illuminated her uncertainty. Each fear she faced carved a new path in her identity. Within the confines of her home later that night, thoughts turned into restless plans. She pulled out her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as she combed through public records, piecing together fragments of her grandfather's legacy. The screen came alive with documentation, names, dates, whispers. Each discovery was a stone moved away from the boulder blocking her true self. At that moment, she realized this was not just about clearing the past, it was sculpting her future. Yet still, a question loomed like a specter. What if the revelations she unearthed were more damning than she anticipated? As clarity washed over her, she felt an undercurrent of apprehension. Just then, her phone buzzed, a message from Adrian. "I've got something I think you'll want to see. Can we meet again tomorrow before reaching out to Carla?" Margaret's heart raced. Had he found something critical, something that might redefine everything she believed? The tumultuous tide of anticipation gripped her. She was on the brink, still wrestling with ghosts of her lineage, but now she was also charged with purpose. Tomorrow promised revelation, yet the true question echoed in her mind. Would this path lead to her liberation, or another murky pit of complication? The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over Margaret as she brewed coffee, her mind swirling with thoughts of Adrian's message and the looming meeting with Carla. Today, everything could change. She felt both the weight of anticipation and the tug of doubt. Her hands shook slightly as she poured the steaming liquid into a mug, a physical manifestation of her inner turmoil. Margaret set the mug down with a slight clatter. Each sip would be a reminder that clarity often came from chaos. She took a deep breath, reminding herself she had faced tough stories before. She had taken risks, sought out uncomfortable truths. Why should this be any different? Yet this time, the stakes felt personal in a way she hadn't fully expected. As she gathered her notes and questions for Carla, she tried to steady her racing thoughts. What if she uncovered something destructive? What if the facade of her family was worse than what she had imagined? Doubts fluttered like moths in her stomach, yet the drive to confront those uncertainties propelled her forward. The clock ticked persistently as Margaret prepared for her meeting. She meticulously arranged her notes, thoughts transitioning between her journalistic instincts and the emotional weight of personal connection. She was no longer just a reporter. She was woven into this narrative, shaped by her lineage, but not confined by it. Arriving at the cafe, her nervous energy transformed into focused determination. The familiar aroma of brewed coffee embraced her as she took a seat by the window, eyes scanning the streets. The ambiance felt charged, anticipating the discovery she might unearth. She envisioned reaching inside Carla's words and finding a gem of truth that could free her from her grandfather's shadow. Moments later, Carla entered. Confident yet guarded, she seemed older than Margaret remembered. Margaret waved her over, and Carla approached, her expression betraying a mix of caution and curiosity. They exchanged pleasantries, yet an undercurrent of tension sat heavily between them. As they settled into conversation, Margaret carefully broached the subject. "I appreciate you meeting."
With me, Carla, there's something I need to understand about my grandfather's role at Global Dynamics. You left shortly after the scandal broke. What happened? The question hung in the air. Carla's lips pressed together, eyes narrowing as if debating how much to reveal. The silence felt pregnant with implications. "I can share some things, but you need to know it's complicated," she finally said, her voice steady, but Margaret could sense the emotional weight behind the words. Margaret leaned in, heart pounding, words tumbling forward. "I need the truth, the whole truth. I owe it to myself to uncover the reality of who he was and what he did." At that moment, Margaret felt a profound shift. She was not just asking questions, she was challenging the narrative she had accepted for so long. Carla, surprised by Margaret's fierce resolve, began to unveil the shadows that had lingered in the corners of their shared past. As revelations flowed, the pieces of Margaret's grandfather emerged from the fog. Sudden alliances, concealed betrayals. Each detail struck her like a lightning bolt, igniting a fire within. This was the truth she sought, complex and painful, yet incredibly liberating. But as the conversation deepened, a sudden thought struck Margaret. The more she learned, the harder it would be to reconcile the man she had idolized with the monster he might have been. Could she bear the weight of this knowledge once fully unveiled? While every grain of information felt like a balm to her identity, she also sensed that it could fracture her family further. The meeting concluded, and Margaret left the cafe feeling disoriented yet energized. Each step felt heavier as she wrestled with her discoveries, grappling with the dualities of love and betrayal. What would she do with the fragmented pieces of her grandfather's legacy? As she approached her car, the reality of her task settled on her shoulders. The confrontation had only just begun. There would be battles ahead, with her own family and her own heart. In that moment, her phone vibrated. A new message from Adrian blinked to life. "We need to talk. I think I've just uncovered something critical about Global Dynamics." The ominous tone sent a chill down her spine. What new truths awaited to complicate her already tenuous journey? She had stepped into a realm of uncertainty, and there was no turning back. Margaret slid into her car, the scent of coffee still lingering in the air as her mind raced with the implications of her meeting. The weight of Carla's revelations pressed heavily on her chest. She felt like a tightrope walker, balancing between admiration for her grandfather's perceived legacy and the unsettling truth that began to take shape. Would she ever find the firm ground she sought, or was she destined to be caught in this dizzying sway of disillusionment? Her phone buzzed again, jolting her from her thoughts, and dread coiled around her gut, mixing with her anticipation. She tapped out a quick response, arranging to meet him at the same cafe. Perhaps he had unearthed vital threads that could weave together the fragments Carla had revealed. As she drove, her mind meandered to the image of her grandfather. His charisma had shielded darker truths, and now she felt as if she were unearthing a buried treasure that could either enrich or ruin her family. She parked, the engine's hum fading into a silence that drowned her in contemplation. Entering the cafe again, she saw Adrian at their usual spot, deep in thought, his brows knit together. He looked up as she approached, his expression hinting at both urgency and concern. "What did you find out?" he asked, his tone low and focused. Margaret hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "Carla, she revealed some things. Darker aspects of my grandfather's dealings with global dynamics," she admitted, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "It's complicated." Adrian's eyes narrowed, his professional instincts kicking in. Complicated how? Summoning her courage, she laid out the pieces Carla had shared, detailing the alliances and betrayals that had irrevocably shaped their family's narrative. As she spoke, she was surprised at how cleanly the words tumbled out. The act felt like shedding an old skin, painful yet liberating. Once she finished, Adrian absorbed the information with keen consideration. "This is significant, Margaret. If we can corroborate what Carla said with documentation or deeper investigation, you could expose patterns of misconduct that might lead to a larger story," he said, his excitement evident. For the first time, Margaret felt the sharp sting of opportunity amid the chaos, the chance to redefine her family's narrative. "But at what cost?" she countered, her voice quiet but insistent. "What will happen to my family when this comes to light?" Adrian's gaze softened. "It's a tough question, but hiding from the truth won't make it go away. You might be the only one capable of bringing this to light, and you have the right as his granddaughter to dig deeper." His words ignited a flicker of determination within her. Maybe this ongoing quest was not just about her grandfather's legacy or her family's reputation. This was also about reclaiming her identity as a journalist, shooting beyond the limits set by fear and familial loyalties. They strategized over coffee, outlining the steps they could take to dig deeper into the global dynamics quagmire. Fear twisted in her stomach as the enormity of their task loomed over her like a shadow. What would confront this relentless search for truth reveal not only about her grandfather, but also about herself? As they wrapped up, Margaret felt aware of the precipice on which she stood. She would confront uncomfortable truths, not only about her legacy, but about her professional identity. She realized that she was transforming, no longer content to simply be an observer of history, but now an active participant in writing it. The conversation shifted abruptly as Adrian's face transformed with intensity. "Speaking of uncovering truths, I might have something you need to read. Documents regarding some recent allegations connected to global dynamics. They might involve your grandfather. Are you ready for that?" Margaret's heart raced. Each revelation seemed to peel away layers of her grandfather while revealing new complexities within herself. The search for the truth had only just begun, and she realized she would need every ounce of strength and resolve she possessed. Stepping into the unknown, she felt the external world press closer, the weight of her grandfather's shadow still lingering. What awaited her in those documents? Would they stretch beyond her grandfather's legacy, right into her own heart, reshaping everything she believed about family and legacy? With a mixture of fear and determination, she knew there was no turning back now. The moment had arrived to confront the battles that her lineage and her journalism awaited. What was hidden in those documents? And more importantly, who would she become after the truth emerged? Margaret clutched the coffee cup tighter, grounding herself in the present moment. She felt the cool ceramic warmth seep into her palms, a stark contrast to the cold wave of dread swirling within. How could she prepare herself for the truths hidden beneath the sheet of paper Adrian would soon place in front of her? With each tick of the cafe's clock, she sensed an unsettling shift, as if the air thickened with unspoken secrets. As she waited, her thoughts spiraled into darker corridors. What if familial loyalty demanded silence in the face of wrongdoing? Yet the journalist in her clamored for justice, her grandfather's legacy, a double-edged sword. She recalled his stories, painted with strokes of valor, but now she questioned their hues. She envisioned her investigative journey unfolding like the pages of a hidden manuscript. Each sentence felt ripe with potential discovery. Finally, Adrian slid a manila folder across the table. Margaret's breath hitched at the sight. It seemed innocuous, yet she could feel the tremors of significance radiating from it. "Before you look," he said, his voice steady, "I want you to know that whatever is in there, you have the power to address it. You're not alone." His reassurance momentarily calmed the storm within, but the tidal wave of possible repercussions loomed large. She lifted the folder, her fingers trembling as she carefully opened it. The papers within smelled faintly of ink and urgency. Reports, testimonies, internal memos. Scanning the first page, her eyes widened, heart pounding in her chest. Details emerged about unethical practices, large transactions that seemed to vanish without a trace. There, amid the text, were hints that alluded to her grandfather, a name, a title, a decision. Anger flickered, accompanied by sorrow over the grand illusion she'd clung to all her life. Each word felt like an unraveling thread, pulling at the fabric of her familial pride. "You okay?" Adrian's voice broke through her haze. Margaret paused, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "No. I mean, yes and no." She took a deep breath, grappling. I had this image, this legacy," she trailed off as the enormity of her discovery registered. "What's the image?" Adrian prodded gently, sensing her internal battle. "My grandfather was a figure of courage, idealized, strong. I never imagined he could be involved in something so corrupt." She felt the words tumble out, heavy yet liberating. With each confession, a layer of denial cracked, revealing raw vulnerability and an emergent sense of responsibility. Adrian leaned in slightly, his expression earnest. "He might have shrouded the business in charisma, but that doesn't mean you have to live in his shadow. You can redefine what legacy means. What will your story be?" The intensity of his question didn't just ignite doubt, but sparked a flicker of defiance within her. She envisioned her place in the unfolding narrative, not merely as a passive figure, but as an agent of change. The truth could be a confrontational mirror, reflecting both her grandfather's misdeeds and her own potential. What would her pursuit of truth reveal about her own convictions? As she continued to sift through the documents, every revelation transformed into a mirror, reflecting not only past betrayals, but illuminating her unwavering resolve to forge her own identity. "Let's not rush this," she finally said, determination settling in like a steady flame. "I need to make sense of these, understand the full impact before I decide what to do next." Adrian nodded, respect etching his features. "That's wise, but we can't forget, if you don't take the leap, you risk being ensnared in the legacy he left behind." The tension between the past and her desire to carve a new path intensified. She had to navigate these murky waters with caution, for the price of truth could be steep. What echoes of her grandfather would she confront, and how would they shape her emerging identity? Margaret tucked the folder carefully under her arm. Empowered, yet apprehensive, she steeled herself for the challenges that awaited. In her heart, she knew she stood on the cusp of transformation. But as she left the cafe, crisp November air biting at her cheeks, a new layer gnawed at her mind. The question lingered. How far was she willing to go to uncover the truth? What sacrifices would be required? Each step felt heavier as she journeyed toward her unknown fate, ready to collide with the shadows of her family's past. The moment for action approached swiftly,
And only one thought resonated in her mind. The past may have its claws in her, but the future was still hers to seize. In the weeks that followed, Margaret embraced the whirlwind of uncovering her grandfather's legacy, wielding the truths she gathered like armor. Each document, each line of correspondence only deepened her resolve to illuminate the dark corners of corruption tied to global dynamics. She was no longer merely a secretary or the granddaughter of a man shrouded in myth. She transformed into a resolute investigator, crafting her story, reshaping her identity in bold strokes. As she meticulously built her case, Margaret established a rhythm, balancing her relentless pursuit of truth with her responsibilities at the firm. Her previous fears, those shadowy whispers of inadequacy, were enveloped by an unwavering confidence. During late-night sessions spent combing through files and preparing presentations, she felt the weight of her grandfather's misdeeds lift, replaced by a sense of purpose. The work she was doing was not just for justice, it was for herself, a reclamation of her narrative that had once belonged to someone else. She invited Adrian into her process, growing their collaboration into a robust partnership that challenges the establishment. His support acted as a beacon, guiding her through doubts that occasionally resurfaced, while simultaneously pushing her to expand her investigative reach. They reached out to contacts, secured interviews, and soon found themselves with a trove of evidence that contradicted the polished image of her grandfather. With every shocking detail they unearthed, Margaret's emotions danced on the edge of betrayal and liberation, reaffirming her resolve to confront the past head-on. One crisp afternoon, after sifting through layers of hidden emails, Margaret located a crucial piece of evidence, a memo detailing the internal workings of a sizable illegal transaction orchestrated by her grandfather. Her heart raced as she processed the implications. Here was the tangible link, the key to not just her grandfather's wrongdoings, but the trail that could lead to justice for those affected. At that moment, she felt an exhilarating surge of empowerment. She had stepped into the role of the protagonist in her own story, wielding truth as a weapon against the obscured legacies of corruption. The date of the press conference drew near, a moment anxious yet electric with purpose. She felt the pressure mounting, buoyed by the weight of collective accountability. She was ready to face not only the boardroom, but also the other employees who had seen her as just a secretary. This marked a turning point in her professional life, where she would prove that a title did not dictate her capabilities. With Jonathan standing at her side, she would confront the very perceptions that had once overshadowed her. When the day arrived, Margaret stood center stage, her voice steady and strong. She presented the findings with conviction, illuminating the legacy of deceit while shedding light on how her grandfather's actions perpetuated a harmful corporate culture. The audience was silent, eyes wide as they absorbed the revelations. At that moment, Margaret experienced profound clarity. The capacity to transform doubt into resolve was no longer a hypothetical notion. It felt real, invigorating, and vital. After the conference, as she navigated through a crowd of reporters and colleagues, Margaret sensed the shift in perception. Applause and commendations greeted her, breaking the silence that had previously accompanied her presence in the office. Her colleagues' recognition signified a hard-won victory. She had conquered not just her grandfather's legacy, but had also proven herself professionally. The bonds that had chained her dreams began to dissolved, replaced with a solid confidence that surged with each interaction. "Margaret," Jonathan said later that day, his eyes shining with pride, "what you did today was extraordinary. You've shown them that you belong here, no longer just as a secretary, but as a force to be reckoned with." Her heart swelled. She had not only achieved her professional goals, but also forged an authentic identity, a balance of ambition and integrity. She'd confronted her grandfather's tarnished legacy and emerged resilient, standing tall in the glare of the truth she had unearthed. Addressing a room full of skeptics had shattered the confines of her past doubts, and she finally felt like the author of her life. With renewed determination, Margaret pivoted her focus toward her unique vision. She would create a platform dedicated to ethical practices in corporate governance, offering support to those grappling with similar legacies. She envisioned a blog, a series of articles exploring justice, truth, and personal growth, a way for others to reclaim their narratives amid the weight of inherited legacies. As the countless hours of work coalesced into a tangible future, Margaret stood at the nexus of triumph and transformation, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. She had not only excavated the truth surrounding her family, but had also laid down the foundation of her own legacy, one marked by courage, accountability, and self-discovery. She took a moment as she reflected on her journey, recognizing a deeper truth. Action, propelled by internal motivation, could illuminate the path toward genuine self-definition. Today, she had not just confronted the shadows of her past, she had conquered them, establishing a narrative dictated by strength and resilience. Margaret laughed to herself, a sound filled with lightness and liberation. She knew she had achieved more than anyone expected. She carried her newfound identity into the vast horizon of possibilities awaiting her. Now is the time for you to step into your own journey of transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help bring more inspiring narratives to those who need it. Comment your reactions and theories about Margaret's journey and how she reclaimed her identity. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to influence someone else's journey of overcoming. Your support is crucial. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.